I didn't choose the hotel because it felt safe. I chose it because it was close to the conference center and cheap enough that my company wouldn't question the receipt. It was one of those mid-range places you see everywhere. Clean lobby, neutral colors, nothing memorable. I arrived just after 10, tired from a long day of travel and meetings, and all I wanted was a quiet room where I could shower and sleep. I was 34 then, traveling alone for work more often than I liked, but often enough that checking into hotels by myself had become routine. That night felt no different at first. The front desk clerk handed me my key card and pointed me toward the elevators. He didn't say anything strange. Nothing about his tone or expression stood out. The lobby was quiet, with only a couple of people sitting near the TV. I remember thinking that it was nice not to hear kids running around or groups coming in late. The elevator ride up to the 4th floor was uneventful. The doors opened onto a long, carpeted hallway, with identical doors on either side and soft lighting that made everything feel slightly unreal, like a place meant to be passed through, not lived in. My room was near the end of the hall. I rolled my suitcase behind me, listening to the sound of the wheels echo softly. When I reached the door, I slid the key card in and pushed the handle down. The door opened immediately. I froze for half a second, then laughed quietly at myself. I must have swiped the card too fast, I thought. I stepped inside, set my suitcase down, and locked the door behind me. The room looked exactly like the photos online. Bed neatly made. TV off. Bathroom light dark. Nothing seemed disturbed. I checked the lock again, just out of habit, and flipped the security latch. Then I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the tension of the day finally start to ease. I sent a quick text to my sister to let her know I'd arrived safely, then plugged my phone in on the nightstand. I left one lamp on and went into the bathroom to shower. When I came back out, the room felt different. Not wrong, exactly, just quieter. I told myself that was normal after a shower, when your ears are still adjusting. I dried my hair, changed into pajamas, and turned the TV on low, mostly for background noise. I didn't want the room to be silent. Hotels always felt too empty at night without some sound. About 15 minutes later, I heard something in the hallway. Footsteps, slow, unhurried, passing by my door, and then stopping. I muted the TV and listened. The footsteps didn't move on. They just stayed there, right outside my room. My heart started beating faster. Not in full panic, but in alertness. I told myself it was probably another guest, maybe someone who'd forgotten which room was theirs. The footsteps shifted slightly. I heard what sounded like a key card being slid into the slot of the door across from mine, then removed. A pause, then another attempt. I let out a breath, relieved. Wrong room, I thought. It happens. But then the footsteps moved again, closer this time. They stopped right in front of my door. I held my breath without realizing it. I waited for the sound of a key card. It didn't come. Instead, there was just silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that feels intentional, like whoever was standing there was listening. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved away. I waited until I heard them fade down the hallway before turning the TV back on. I told myself I was overreacting. Traveling alone made me jumpy. That was all. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I frowned, annoyed, assuming it was spam. When I opened the message, my stomach tightened. It said, "You checked in late." I stared at the screen, rereading the words. I hadn't posted anything about my trip. I hadn't told anyone outside of work where I was staying. I typed back, asking who it was, then deleted the message before sending it. Something about responding felt wrong. The phone buzzed again. 4th floor is quiet tonight. My chest felt tight. I glanced toward the door, then looked away. I didn't want to imagine someone on the other side. I locked the phone and set it face down, telling myself not to engage. Hotels reused phone numbers sometimes, I reasoned. Messages went to the wrong rooms. There were explanations for this. Another buzz. I flipped the phone over despite myself. You turned the TV down. I felt a cold rush of fear. I hadn't realized how clearly the sound must have carried through the door. I stood up and checked the lock again. The deadbolt was secure. The latch was still in place. I pulled the curtains closed, even though the window faced nothing but the side of another building. My phone buzzed again. "You don't need to hide." I sat back down on the bed, my hands shaking. I typed that they had the wrong number and needed to stop. The reply came almost immediately. "No, I don't." Outside, I heard footsteps again. Slow, careful. They stopped in front of my door. I could hear breathing this time. faint but unmistakable, like someone standing too close. I grabbed my phone and dialed the front desk, my voice barely steady as I explained that someone was outside my room and messaging me. The clerk told me to stay inside and that security was on the way. While I waited, my phone buzzed one more time. I won't knock. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I sat on the bed, staring at the door, listening to the person on the other side do nothing at all. I stayed perfectly still on the edge of the bed, my eyes fixed on the door like it might move on its own if I looked away. The message sat on my screen, the words, "I won't knock," feeling heavier the longer I stared at them. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call again if I had to, but I didn't want to make a sound. The hallway outside was silent. No footsteps, no voices, just the low hum of the building settling, like the hotel itself was breathing. After what felt like a long time, I heard a radio crackle faintly somewhere down the hall. A door opened and closed. Muffled voices followed, then footsteps approaching. Whoever had been outside my room moved away quickly, their steps lighter now, less careful. I didn't hear them run, just retreat. A moment later, there was a knock on my door. I flinched hard enough that my phone almost slipped out of my hand. "Hotel security," a man's voice said, calm and professional. I didn't open the door right away. I asked him to slide his badge under the door. He did. I crouched down and checked it, then slowly unlatched the door and opened it just enough to see him standing there with another employee. The hallway looked normal again, bright and empty. No one else around. They asked if I was okay and if I'd seen anyone. I said no, that I'd only heard someone outside and received messages. They took my phone number down and asked to see the messages, their expressions tightening slightly as they read them. One of them said they'd review the hallway cameras and asked if I wanted to change rooms. I said yes without hesitation. They moved me to a different floor, closer to the elevators and the front desk. I double-locked the door as soon as they left and sat on the bed with every light on, my suitcase still half unpacked. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me tense, even the distant elevator chime or footsteps from another guest. When morning finally came, the room looked ordinary and harmless, like nothing had happened at all. At the front desk, I asked if they'd found anyone on the cameras. The clerk hesitated before saying they'd seen someone standing in the hallway near my room for a few minutes, but couldn't clearly identify them. The cameras didn't show them entering or exiting any room, just standing there, then walking away when security approached. She told me they'd flagged the footage and that I should contact the police if I felt unsafe. She said it gently, like this wasn't the first time she'd had that conversation. I left the hotel as soon as I could and switched to another place across town, one with brighter lights and a busier lobby. I told myself it was over, that it had been a strange coincidence mixed with bad timing. I focused on my meetings, kept my days full, and avoided being alone in my room as much as possible. That night, back at the new hotel, I checked the locks twice and left the TV on low while I lay in bed. I was exhausted, but afraid to fall asleep. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. My heart dropped before I even looked at the screen. Unknown number. "You moved rooms." My chest tightened. I sat up slowly, scanning the room, even though I knew no one could be inside with me. I typed a response, telling them to stop contacting me, and that security and police were involved. The reply came after a pause. "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable." I blocked the number immediately. I didn't wait to see if another message would come through. I called the front desk and asked if anyone had asked about me or my room. They said no. I didn't sleep much that night either. Over the next few days, nothing else happened. No messages, no footsteps. I finished my work trip and went home, relieved to be back in my own space. I told myself the worst part was over, that being home would make everything feel normal again. For a while, it did. Weeks passed. Then one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hotels aren't the only places with thin walls. I stared at the message until my eyes burned, then blocked the number again. I changed my phone number the next day. I didn't tell many people the new one. I stopped posting travel photos in real time. I became more careful in ways I hadn't been before. Not because I wanted to live in fear, but because I couldn't unlearn what I'd learned. Even now, when I stay in hotels, I check the door twice before stepping inside. I listen in the hallway before unlocking it. I leave the TV on at night, not for comfort, but to remind myself that silence isn't always safety. Because the most unsettling part of that night wasn't the messages or the person outside my door. It was realizing how easily someone could watch, notice, and follow without ever having to touch the handle. I didn't plan to stay in the hotel that night. My flight had been delayed twice, and by the time I landed, it was already close to midnight. Driving another 2 hours home felt dangerous, so I booked the nearest place I could find on my phone while waiting for my luggage. It wasn't somewhere I'd normally choose. It was convenient, clean enough, and close to the highway. That was all I cared about. I was 36 at the time and used to traveling alone, used to late nights and unfamiliar places. I told myself this was just another stop, another room that wouldn't matter once the night was over. The lobby was quiet when I checked in. Too quiet, maybe, but I didn't think much of it. The front desk clerk gave me my key card and directions to the elevators. He didn't ask how my trip was or make small talk. He just smiled politely and went back to his screen. I noticed a man standing near the coffee station, pretending to stir an empty cup. He glanced at me once, then looked away. That was all. I didn't think about him again. My room was on the 5th floor, halfway down a long hallway with patterned carpet and evenly spaced doors. The lights were dimmer than I liked, but still bright enough to see clearly. I rolled my suitcase behind me, listening to the sound echo faintly. When I reached my door, I unlocked it, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. I checked the latch, then checked it again. That was habit, nothing more. The room looked normal. Bed, desk, chair, TV, bathroom off to the side. I left my suitcase near the door and turned on the lamp by the bed. I didn't unpack, I just wanted to sleep. I sent a quick message to my sister, letting her know where I was, then plugged my phone in and sat down, letting the silence settle. That was when I heard the footsteps. They weren't loud, just slow, measured steps moving down the hallway outside my door. I paused, listening. Hotels always had sounds at night. People coming back late, elevators opening, doors closing. These steps felt different somehow, unhurried, like whoever it was wasn't trying to get anywhere quickly. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of a keycard. It didn't come. I waited for a knock. That didn't come either. There was just silence, heavy and close, like someone standing right on the other side, listening. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved again. They went past my door, then stopped farther down the hall. I let out a slow breath and shook my head at myself. I was tired, that was all. Everything felt worse when you were exhausted. I changed into pajamas and sat on the bed, scrolling through my phone. I left the lamp on and turned the TV on low, not really watching it. I didn't want the room to feel empty. After a while, the tension faded enough that I lay down and closed my eyes. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned, annoyed, assuming it was spam. When I opened the message, my stomach tightened. "You got to your room safely." I sat up instantly. I hadn't told anyone my room number. I hadn't told anyone I'd arrived. I typed back, asking who it was, then deleted the message before sending. Something about replying felt like a mistake. The phone buzzed again. 5th floor is quiet tonight. My heart started beating faster. I glanced toward the door, then looked away. I told myself there were explanations. Hotels reused phone numbers. Messages went to the wrong guest. People made mistakes. Another message appeared. "You didn't unpack." I felt a cold rush move through me. That wasn't something you guessed. I stood up and checked the door again. Locked. Latched. I pulled the curtains closed, even though the window faced nothing but another wing of the building. The phone buzzed again. "You're tired." My hands started shaking. I typed that they had the wrong person and needed to stop. The reply came almost immediately. "No, I don't." Outside, I heard footsteps again, slow, careful. They stopped right outside my door. I could hear breathing this time, faint but unmistakable, like someone standing too close. I grabbed my phone and dialed the front desk, my voice low as I told the clerk someone was outside my room and messaging me. She told me to stay inside and that security was on the way. She asked if I could see anyone. I said no. I didn't want to look. While I waited, my phone buzzed again. I just wanted to say hi. I sat on the bed, staring at the door, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The footsteps stayed there, not moving closer, not leaving, just waiting. That was when I realized something that made the fear sharper. Whoever it was hadn't followed me to the hotel by accident. They knew I was alone. They knew I'd arrived late, and they knew exactly which door was mine, and that meant the night was far from over. I stayed sitting on the bed, long after I ended the call with the front desk, my eyes fixed on the door, my phone clenched so tightly in my hand that my fingers started to ache. The message, "I just wanted to say hi," sat on the screen like it was testing me, waiting to see what I would do next. Outside, the hallway was silent again. No footsteps, no movement, just the faint hum of the air system somewhere above the ceiling. That silence felt deliberate, like whoever had been standing there knew exactly when to disappear. After a few minutes, I heard voices in the hallway. 2 of them, low and professional. A knock followed, firm but calm. "Hotel security," a man said. I didn't move right away. I asked him to identify himself again, to slide his badge under the door. He did. I crouched down and checked it, my hands still shaking, then unlocked the latch and opened the door just enough to see 2 uniformed employees standing there. The hallway looked normal, brightly lit and empty. No one else in sight. They asked me to explain what happened, and I told them everything, from the footsteps to the messages. They looked at my phone, their expressions tightening slightly as they scrolled through the texts. One of them said they would check the cameras immediately. The other asked if I wanted to move rooms. I said yes before he even finished the question. They walked me to a new room closer to the elevators and the front desk. I noticed how different it felt just being near other doors, other people, even if I couldn't see them. Once inside, I double-locked the door, set the suitcase against it without really thinking, and sat on the bed with every light on. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me tense, even the elevator ding or muffled laughter from somewhere down the hall. In the morning, I went down to the front desk to ask if they'd found anything on the cameras. The clerk hesitated before answering, which told me more than her words did. She said they'd seen a man standing outside my original room for a few minutes, but the angle wasn't clear enough to identify his face. He hadn't tried the handle. He hadn't knocked. He had just stood there, then walked away when security came down the hall. She said it like it wasn't uncommon. I checked out early and moved to a different hotel across town, one with a busier lobby and brighter lighting. I told myself it was over, that whatever strange attention I'd drawn had ended the moment security got involved. I focused on my meetings, kept my days full, and avoided being alone in my room at night as much as I could. That night, in the new hotel, I left the TV on and kept my phone close. I was exhausted, but afraid to sleep. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. My stomach dropped before I even looked. Unknown number. "You didn't like the first room." I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. I typed back, telling them to stop contacting me and that security had been involved. The reply came after a pause. "I know." That single sentence made my chest feel tight. It meant they'd noticed the change. Not just the room, but the reason behind it. I blocked the number immediately and called the front desk, asking if anyone had asked about me or my room. They said no. I didn't sleep much that night either. When I got home from the trip, I felt relief settle in my chest the moment I unlocked my own front door. Familiar walls, familiar sounds. I told myself that whatever had happened was tied to travel, to being somewhere temporary and exposed. At home, things would be different. For a while, they were. Days turned into weeks. I went back to my routine. I stopped thinking about hotel hallways and dim lights. The fear faded into something distant, something I could keep at arm's length. Then one evening, as I was sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone, a message came through. Unknown number. "You're home now." I stared at the screen, my hands going cold. I didn't respond. I blocked the number immediately, then changed my phone number the next day. I didn't tell many people the new one. I tightened my privacy settings. I stopped posting travel photos in real time. I became more careful without really meaning to. Nothing else ever came after that. No more messages, no more footsteps, no explanations. Even now, when I stay in hotels, I listen in the hallway before unlocking the door. I check the latch twice. I leave the TV on at night, not for comfort, but because silence feels like an invitation. Because the most unsettling part of that night wasn't the person outside my door. It was realizing how easily someone could notice me, follow my movements, and stay just close enough to remind me they were still there, without ever having to touch the handle. I didn't think the hotel would feel different just because it was smaller. I'd stayed in places like it before, older buildings tucked between newer ones, narrow hallways, thin walls, the kind of place you chose because it was close to where you needed to be, and nothing more. I was 38 then, traveling alone for work again, and the only thing I wanted when I arrived close to midnight was a room where I could sleep without thinking. The lobby was quiet when I checked in, the kind of quiet that made you lower your voice without realizing it. The clerk handed me my key card and told me my room was on the 3rd floor, near the stairwell. I remember thinking that might be convenient if the elevator took too long. That was the extent of the thought. The 3rd floor hallway was dimmer than the lobby, lit by small wall fixtures, spaced farther apart than I liked. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I walked, pulling my suitcase behind me. My room was the 2nd door from the stairwell. I unlocked it, stepped inside, and locked it again, then flipped the latch. Habit. The room was clean, simple, nothing out of place. Bed, desk, chair, bathroom off to the side. I set my bag down, turned on the lamp by the bed, and sat for a moment, letting the stillness settle. Hotels always had a way of feeling like no one knew you were there, and that usually brought relief. I changed into pajamas and left the TV on low while I scrolled through my phone. The sound made the room feel occupied, like it wasn't just me and my thoughts. After a while, I muted it and leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. That was when I heard the door in the hallway open. Not my door, another one. Then, footsteps. Slow, measured, moving past my room. I listened until they faded, then dismissed it. People came and went at all hours in hotels. It didn't mean anything. A few minutes later, the footsteps came back. This time they stopped outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for the sound of a key card or a knock. Neither came. There was just silence, close enough that I could feel it. I told myself it was probably someone checking room numbers, someone confused. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved again, heading toward the stairwell. I exhaled and shook my head at myself. I was tired, that was all. I reached over and turned the lamp off, leaving the room lit only by the faint glow from the hallway creeping under the door. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned, annoyed, assuming it was spam. When I opened the message, my stomach tightened. "You're on the 3rd floor." I stared at the screen, reading it again. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. I hadn't shared my room number with anyone outside of the front desk. Another message came through. "Near the stairs." I sat up slowly, my heart starting to race. I typed back that they had the wrong number, then deleted it before sending. Something about replying felt like the wrong move. I locked my phone and set it face down, trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Hotels reused phone numbers. Messages went to the wrong guests. It happened. My phone buzzed again. I flipped it over, despite myself. "You turned the light off." A cold feeling settled in my chest. I hadn't realized how clearly the change in the room would be visible from the hallway. I stood up and checked the door, even though I knew it was locked. Deadbolt, latch, both secure. I pulled the curtains closed, even though the window faced nothing but another wall. The phone buzzed again. "It's quieter now." I sat back on the bed, my hands shaking. I dialed the front desk, my voice low as I explained that someone was messaging me and seemed to know where my room was. The clerk told me to stay inside and that security would check the floor. She asked if I'd seen anyone. I said no. I didn't want to look through the peephole. I didn't want to confirm anything. While I waited, I heard footsteps again, slower this time. They stopped outside my door. I could hear breathing, faint but unmistakable, like someone standing close enough to listen. My phone buzzed. I'm not in a hurry. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. I stayed on the call with the front desk, whispering what I could hear. The footsteps didn't move. Whoever it was just stood there, not knocking, not testing the handle, just being present. After what felt like a long time, I heard voices down the hall. A radio crackled. The footsteps retreated quickly, lighter now, less careful. Security knocked a moment later. I asked them to identify themselves and check through the peephole before opening the door. The hallway looked normal again, empty and brightly lit. They took my statement and looked at the messages on my phone. One of them said they'd review the cameras and asked if I wanted to change rooms. I said yes immediately. They moved me to a room closer to the elevator, where there was more foot traffic. I locked the door behind me and sat on the bed with every light on. I didn't sleep. Every sound felt too loud, every pause between sounds too long. In the morning, the front desk told me the cameras had shown someone standing near my original door for several minutes before walking toward the stairwell. They couldn't identify him clearly. He hadn't tried to enter. He just waited. I checked out early and switched hotels. I told myself it was over, that it had been a strange coincidence, bad luck layered on exhaustion. For a while, I believed that. Then, late that night in the new hotel, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The stairs are easier than elevators. I didn't reply. I blocked the number and changed my phone number the next day. Nothing else ever came of it. But even now, when I stay in hotels, I avoid rooms near stairwells. I listen in the hallway before unlocking the door. Because what stayed with me wasn't just the messages or the footsteps. It was realizing how much someone could learn just by watching who came and went, and how easily being alone in a hotel room could make you visible without ever knowing it. I stayed awake until morning with every light on, sitting on the edge of the bed and listening to the sounds of the hotel return to normal one by one. The security staff had told me they would keep an eye on the floor for the rest of the night, but the reassurance felt thin once I was alone again. Every noise seemed intentional. The elevator stopping down the hall, a door closing somewhere below. Even the faint rush of air through the vents made my heart jump. When daylight finally came, the room looked harmless, like it had the night before anything strange happened. I almost convinced myself that exhaustion had filled in the blanks with fear, that the messages had been a coincidence layered on a quiet hallway and a bad night's sleep. At the front desk, I asked if they had learned anything from the cameras. The clerk hesitated, then said they'd seen someone in the stairwell around the time I called, lingering on the third floor longer than expected. They couldn't identify the person clearly. He hadn't tried any doors. He'd just waited, then left when security approached. The clerk said it gently, like she'd said similar things before. She asked if I wanted to check out early. I did. I switched hotels again, choosing a larger one closer to downtown with a busy lobby and more staff around. I told myself it was over, that whatever strange attention I'd attracted had ended the moment security got involved. I focused on my meetings, kept my days full, and avoided being alone in my room as much as possible. At night, I left the TV on and slept with the lights dimmed but not off. I didn't want the room to ever feel empty. For a couple of days, nothing happened. No messages, no footsteps. The tension eased just enough that I could breathe normally again. I started to feel embarrassed about how afraid I'd been, like I'd let a handful of unexplained moments spiral into something bigger than it needed to be. Then, on the third night, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. Unknown number. You don't like stairs. I stared at the screen, my mouth suddenly dry. I hadn't told anyone about the room change or why I'd asked for it. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't even mentioned it to coworkers. I set the phone down without replying and finished getting ready for bed, my hands shaking just enough that I noticed. A few minutes later, another message appeared. Elevators feel safer. That was when it clicked that this wasn't about one hotel or one hallway. Someone had been paying attention across places, across nights, noticing patterns I hadn't realized were visible. I blocked the number immediately and called the front desk, asking if anyone had been asking about me or my room. They said no. I didn't sleep much that night either. When I got home from the trip, I felt relief the moment I unlocked my own front door. Familiar walls, familiar sounds. I told myself that whatever had happened was tied to travel, to being somewhere temporary and exposed. At home, things would be different. For a while, they were. Days passed. Then weeks. I settled back into my routine and stopped thinking about hotel stairwells and dim hallways. The fear faded into something distant, something I could keep at arm's length. Then one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're home now. My stomach dropped. I didn't reply. I blocked the number immediately and changed my phone number the next day. I didn't tell many people the new one. I tightened my privacy settings and stopped sharing travel details in real time. I became more careful without really meaning to. Nothing else ever came after that. No more messages, no explanations. Life returned to something close to normal, though normal felt different than it had before. Even now, years later, I still notice where stairwells are when I stay in hotels. I still listen in the hallway before unlocking the door. I still prefer rooms closer to elevators and staff, because the most unsettling part of that experience wasn't the messages or the person outside my door. It was realizing how easily someone could watch, notice, and learn simply by paying attention to where a woman goes when she thinks no one is looking, and how being alone in a temporary place can make you visible without ever realizing it.